So welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon for the event Stay Ahead of the Curve, Retail and E-commerce Supply Chain Optimization AI. My name is Kushalia Ganatalaka and I head partnerships and community at Barb AI. For those of you that don't know too much about Barb AI, just to give you a very quick summary, we're a scale-up investment program based in Melbourne. And that we invest in Victorian startups as well as international AI companies that are ready to expand globally. And we're backed by LaunchVic and Artesian. Now, before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which this event will take place from, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, as well as the traditional owners right across our country. I pay my respects to the elders, past, present, and emerging, and I extend this acknowledgement and respect to elders from other nations on whose lands we meet, wherever we are calling in from today. I'd also like to thank our supporters, LaunchVic and Artesian, for making this event possible today. Now, today, we'd like to talk about artificial intelligence and how we can use that in retail and e-commerce supply chain to streamline the costs and operations, but also meeting the consumer demands. And we also want to talk about the benefits for this for players in retail and e-commerce. So to discuss this, we have a fantastic panel with us today. And I'd love to just get them each to introduce themselves and what they do at their company. So maybe we'll start with Eamonn Barrett. So Eamonn is the founder and head of sales at Remy AI. Eamonn, I might pass it over to you.
Sure, thanks Cash, thanks for the kind intro. And yeah, thanks to everyone for being here. So yeah, very quickly about Remy. Remy is a supply chain technology firm. So we help retailers and manufacturers to bring AI and machine learning into some of their supply chain decisions. So we built a platform which we're calling an AI co-pilot. And the idea is that it really is that companion, I suppose, that can help you with the, help you make sense of some of the uncertainty that is inherent within supply chains, both on the demand and the supply side. So we work with companies both large and small, retail and manufacturing, from small startups all the way up to the likes of Coca-Cola, Microsoft. So very excited to be here today and looking forward to a great conversation.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Eamonn. We also have Georgie Uppington, who is the Chief Operating Officer at Fresh Supply Co. Georgie, would you like to just give a quick intro to yourself and Fresh Supply Co?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. And thanks for everyone for joining today. A little bit about myself. I started with Fresh Supply Co. In 2018, since inception. I spent 20 years producing visual effects and animation for film and advertising, and working directly with software developers. So essentially, it was a natural transition for me to start working in software development and tech for agriculture, as I'm actually from Queensland, Western Queensland, and based currently in Brisbane. So Fresh Supply Co. Essentially, we started off as a traceability company once upon a time. We still do that, though we decided to take operational data and help us make decisions in to provide working capital. We're very early in that journey, but the market told us that a more meaningful outcome was a lower cost of capital for verticals. And the problem we're solving is their cost and access of that working capital for agriculture. One thing that has never changed in our journey from being traceability to now finding working capital for businesses is the importance of data. It used to be very consumer driven, that data, and now it's data more driven for the financier. So yeah, we're also really proud of our journey and our partnerships that we've built with MasterCard and Sorrelto. So it's been a wonderful 3 years, and onwards and upwards, we're only just getting started really in terms of what we can do and achieve with our current pipeline and products.
Amazing. Thanks, Georgie. Looking forward to hearing more about Fresh Supply Co. and all the work in AI as well. Rushabh Sanghavi, who is the Chief Commercial Officer at BROSA. Rushabh, love to hear a bit about you and BROSA as well.
Thanks, Cash. Thanks everyone for joining in today. So I'm the Chief Commercial Officer at BROSA. At BROSA, we are building a truly omni-channel, digitally native furniture brand out of Australia. We're a 7-year-old organization. And we pride ourselves in bringing on-trend products to consumers at accessible prices and providing them with best-in-class pre-sales experience, which actually simplifies a very high cognitive load process around buying furniture, which is not so straightforward. As most of you would have gone through the process will understand that it's a complex process, which we help customers and take them on the journey around decision making around furniture, as well as providing them best-in-class post-sales experience along with the right delivery, product assembly, and just a great experience across the supply chain. At BROSA, I lead the marketing as well as the supply chain team, so demand and supply both. And prior to BROSA, I've spent the last 12 years in e-commerce businesses, primarily in the furniture and home side. And as part of my last role, I've been in BROSA for the last 3.5 years. Part of my last role, I used to lead the furniture, grocery, and home private labels for Flipkart, which is India's largest e-commerce retailer, now part of Walmart. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, love that we have all of you on this panel today. And just from the introductions that you gave, I know that you're all at different stages of incorporating AI into your business. So maybe we'll kick off with the first question. Can you tell us where in your respective journeys in AI, in using AI in your businesses? So might start that off. Rushabh, maybe we'd like to start that off with you.
Sure. I guess, in terms of, as most people, we are, we've been, as a digitally native business, we do have access to a lot of information from customers around supply. However, having said that, we are quite early in our, in what potential we see in terms of AI. If you think about, what is AI meant to solve and what is supply chain meant to solve, I guess at a broader level, it is about ensuring that we're getting products to customers at the right price when they need it. And if you think about that statement, breaking it down, we obviously use elements of AI around our demand forecasting. Being in an industry which is generally plagued with very long lead times, it very, very high variability in demand, as well as, with not so clear substitutes, which means, if you like a particular, let's say, couch, you'll probably wait for that couch as opposed to buying a different couch that is available to you today. So it's important for us to understand and be able to assess demand across each of our product categories, each of our product styles. And that becomes very, very important. We do rely on signals such as, polling customers, running first party data, as well as thinking about what are the linkages we're able to build through products, which means, we're able to understand for a mid-century sort of couches, for example, there is a certain customer, there is a certain demand, and then we're able to say, this is a group of sort of, products that we have, which are mid-century, and then able to understand how will the demand play out between each of these. I feel like demand forecasting is a very, very important aspect where we see huge application for AI. I think the other part around of our business where we see huge application, and we've made some early steps, is around actually working more deeply with our manufacturers to prioritize and ensure that we get the right products to customers in time. We obviously, because we work with very long lead times, during the journey of when a product is being produced, demand patterns do change variably, right? And you'll see, because we work with, let's say, 6-month lead times, there are times when, a product that is selling really well suddenly drops off because there is something else that becomes in trend. And we need to be on top of this sort of, changing in demand pattern and be able to feed that back to suppliers, which then helps them inform what is it that needs to be prioritized at the end in terms of manufacturing. So that's the other piece around which, we make sure that we're passing enough information to suppliers. We are working proactively with suppliers to be able to forecast demand and then, keep upgrading and keep updating our demand. So that's the other area where we see, opportunities and where we've made some early steps, I would say. I think the third thing is around, which is not as much supply chain, but it is sort of, there are two aspects, which is one is pricing and promotions, and trying to understand what is the sensitivity of, price versus lead time to customer for furniture. Most of you may know that furniture is an industry and category which has very variable lead times. You could get a couch, 3 months, or you could get a couch tomorrow. And we need to be able to understand what is the right level of demand that we want to achieve, and what is the sensitivity at each SKU level to this lead time. And I think that's an area where we've done actually quite a lot of work, and we continue to expand that aspect of our business, which is to understand when is that drop off for a customer for each SKU in terms of what is the tolerance of wait for the product for the customer, and that helps us optimize our supply chain, keep our inventory levels in check. And that's sort of one area where we do apply, and we are taking some steps there. I think the last part is around logistics. So we do manage our entire logistics network. We have our own fleet of trucks which manage supply, which manage delivery to customers in the Sydney and Melbourne metropolitan regions. And for those, we we do a lot of route optimization to be able to get the cheapest cost of delivery and maximum utilization for our trucks. And that's an area where we continue to push the envelope around using as much data as we have, and then combining it with a machine learning algorithm. I think these are the areas where we see good application, and these are the early areas, but obviously there is application for AI across many other areas of the business, but this is where we've started in some sense. So, yeah.
Amazing. I think it's great to hear how proactive BROSA are currently, and how you're actually applying AI into different applications as well. Georgie, you're at an earlier stage of your AI journey. Did you want to explain a bit about that and where you're up to and what you're thinking as well?
Yeah, sure. So we probably perceive ourselves as being at a very early stage, but maybe to others, but we're not. We're very focused on data collection, and specifically in agriculture, that is mainly processing at this point, depending on who our customer or supply chain is. We have great visibility in terms of, say, for a meat supplier, from their feedlot, abattoir, and then onto their retailer. So from the very start of the supply chain to the very end of the supply chain, and creating a narrative around that. We don't really know what a great use case for AI around that part of the business would be, but the data certainly informs us when it comes to credit risk perspective, how the business is going, and adding more intelligence to that, so that we can feed information to our lenders, banking and non-banking lenders, and help them make a decision. So rather than it being, say, an algorithm, to give it, or actually, no, it could be an algorithm to give a particular score that gives them a look into the future of, what the company may look like. We don't want it to be human driven necessarily. So not an analyst having to be involved in various different people, various different spreadsheets and whatnot that could actually become programs or products in order to help make that decision. So what we were seeing was, seeing the data in such big lots of data, and then looking at lending from that perspective, we could see not just like the banks look at the bottom line and where people's money sit and lie in their cash flow. We can actually look at how well they're doing in market and what they're actually selling, much like Rushabh was saying about, something that's going really well, and then you can tell that something is overtaking that trend. So, say you're selling a lot more very high-end Wagyu into the market in Asia, that's something that we notoriously think is happening, but is it a particular cut or something like that, or is something not selling? And at the end of the day, these people do well as they're exporting anyway, but what is their business may grow and grow over time as demand and supply is lower in other countries, so say the US or something like that. So really we help make decisions with our data, and having AI around that is going to make things a lot easier and a lot quicker. And not that I want to take anyone out of a job, but essentially that's what AI does in giving us just greater and deeper intelligence on the data that we do have.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And I think I want to come back to you on that point on the data that you mentioned, but I might just quickly pass over to Eamonn as well. So Eamonn, I know at Remi AI, you're supporting companies like BROSA and Fresh Supply Co. To be able to make those critical decisions in supply chain. Could you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Really interesting listening to both Rushabh and Georgie as you described your approaches to this, because what has come out of that, or what is apparent, is that you're both viewing the supply chain as that it should be quite collaborative, and that retailers and manufacturers shouldn't be operating in silos. And that's exactly how we look at the supply chain as well. So when we were first founding Remy, we were just tossing up the different approaches that we could take, and one approach is to go very, very deep on one industry, so become retail homewares experts and do everything that particular niche would need, including workforce and all these other things. But we thought that's just not what we're seeing in the market, what people are wanting. That they're really wanting that collaborative piece. So the approach that we've taken is to help on, I guess, both sides of the supply chain equation, so both demand and supply. So just as Rushabh was saying, on the demand side, you've got forecasting, you've got promotions, you've got pricing. All of these are key activities which, like promotions and pricing, are driving demand, and then you're forecasting demand, and then that's driving decisions on the supply side of what to purchase and when and where it should go in a store network. So all of these decisions along this enormous chain are areas in which we're helping with our platform. And then where it really starts to become interesting is where you start to work with the retailer and the manufacturer and the logistics provider, because then you really are, you're integrating yourself or you're ingraining yourself along that chain, and just becoming so useful, adding so much value to all three of those stakeholders. So that's our approach, and it's always encouraging to hear other retailers that are looking at it that way as well.
Yeah, that's great to hear, and I think it's great to see those different sides that you're all at with BROSA and Fresh Supply Co, and then how Remy actually support companies like yourselves. So Georgie, I want to go back to that point that you mentioned about data and how important that is. So when I've spoken to entrepreneurs, they say that 99% of the work is creating and cleaning the data set. Would that be your perspective on that as well?
I mean, look, the way in which I'd put it is that obviously there's quality and quantity of the data is important, and mitigating any human interaction with that data preferably. But, cleaning the data is what we do. So we need to build a level of trust and be trusted with your data in order to then take it, structure it in a certain way so that it fits inside our databases, and then it can be used. I think people think that they need to hand it over to you sort of squeaky clean, but we actually prefer it as is, because no one interacting with it at all means that we take the data into a couple of different buckets before we then structure it through our database. But, having more data is the best thing. I don't need you to clean it up first in order to hand it over to us. And if you think about it like this, an Excel spreadsheet with a whole lot of garbage in it versus one that's in pretty columns and rows, like if we're going to get down to the nitty gritty of how we like our data. The fact of the matter is if you've got an ID that say helps you trace that data back from the beginning of the product journey to the end of the product journey, that's really all we need. And we structure that in a certain way so that it makes sense. But withholding data like through the entire supply chain is not going to do you any favors whatsoever. And I think, as Eamonn was saying, like, you don't want it siloed. You want to open the whole chain up and trust us, like the people that work with data every day, to be able to structure that in a way so it actually makes sense and you can use it and you can see what sort of trends are being produced by this data. And it could be from a sales perspective, it could be from a consumer perspective. You just really don't know. But the more data you have, the better you obviously are, because it creates a bigger picture.
Yeah, definitely. Eamonn and Rushabh, did you have anything to add to that?
I guess just building on what you were saying, Georgie, around preferring the raw data. We're a bit the same, just I guess with the caveat that sometimes we do receive some absolute rubbish that we need help with from customers. So, but generally, yes, we're the same. That's pre or unclean data means that bias hasn't been unintentionally added already by a user. So we're of the same thought process.
And I often say, like, you're only as good as the data you receive, right? So you can only tell a story with the data that you receive. So if anything is held back, or you sort of think, oh, you need to just know sales order and price and product SKU or whatever, like very minimal view, you can't sort of create a full story with it, and you don't know what you don't know. So, you know, I'm happy to say, just give us everything, and we'll help you structure it in a way so that it makes sense. And I feel like when you do get, you know, what you say is garbage data, it's mainly because someone or something has interacted with it beforehand. So I tend to agree with you, definitely.
I mean, I think as a digitally native business, there is a lot of data that is inherently present in the business for us. And, you know, we have enough signals from consumers. The question is, how do we really bring out the right level of insights, and what is the level of data that we want to address? And, you know, how do we keep going deeper down that stack of data? I think that's probably where we're at, which is, you know, we do model our future based on a certain set of data, but the question is, you know, how much more do we want to, can we keep bringing into this to keep making our future more accurate? So it's like, you know, we probably today measure, you know, this tension between how long does a product take to get to a customer versus, you know, what's the conversion of that product at that point of time, and hence what is the future forecasted demand. I think that's probably one example of, you know, where, for example, we obviously now over the last year, we've figure out how do we build in more external elements to this. And I think that's probably one area to think about, which is what are all the external elements that we're capturing. There is a certain set of elements that we hold within our e-commerce shopfront in that sense, if you may. And then there is supplier. So it's like, you know, we know once the product is, you know, allocated to BROSA, we track the product right from the point of the supplier, right up to the point it reaches the customer. Even after the life of when it stays with the customer, if there is a quality problem in the future, we are able to then go back to that data, understand which batch that product came from, and then understand, you know, hence what does that mean for quality in that batch for products that are produced at that point of time with that manufacturer. So I think that's something that, you know, we try and do enough of, but it's all of this external data. And the question is, how do we cleanse it, and how do we, you know, get the right insights from it, which then inform a certain level of decision making around demand forecasting is one piece that we'd like to unpack more and more as we go forward.
And I just want to add to that, you know, we work with farmers, you know, we work with processing data predominantly, and, you know, that comes from farmers, right? So they're used to running their land pencil and paper, and it works perfectly fine. But we get to a point where, you know, the bigger the farm, the more digital it has to be. But the fact is that digital is going to become compliant if it isn't already. And I think that, you know, we shouldn't hold back from that. And sometimes it's hard for us to sell that into smaller producers. Not that we work with very small, medium and large, but the smaller producer tends to, you know, have, you know, the Excel spreadsheets and the PDFs of the world, which are, you know, not the greatest to grab data from. We'd rather a very beautiful, lovely ERP that's very fully integrated. But you know, the fact of the matter is that when is digital going to become compliant, and therefore we can start using AIs around that. And it's taking a long time, especially in agriculture, to get to that point. I think, you know, with logistics, it's obviously just something that's sort of inherently happened over time, and has become, you know, more and more efficient because of that. But agriculture is certainly held back because you can run it on pieces of paper, basically, without any problems, you know.
Yeah, that's really great. And yeah, I think there's so much more that still needs to be understood, especially with data and also the different sectors as well. I wanted to ask a question just with benefits. So this is to all of you. So what would you see as some of the benefits for retail and e-commerce organizations that are actually looking to incorporate AI into their supply chain? Because I know we've got a fair number of retail and e-commerce members joining us today. So Eamonn, did you want to start off with that one?
Yeah, certainly. So, gee, where to start, I guess, is the hard part here. There really are benefits on both sides of the revenue and the cost equation for retailers and e-commerce businesses, of course, by using AI in their supply chains. I guess starting with revenue, even just looking at the activities in which that we work with, the inventory management and the forecasting and the logistics. We're talking increasing revenue by reducing lost sales. So anytime you stocked out, you can't sell something, therefore you're potentially losing a sale. So by reducing stock outs, we're increasing sales. by not holding too much stock at the end of a season or in general, you're reducing the stock that needs to be discounted. And so therefore you're increasing revenue there as well. And then on the pricing optimization side of things, I mean, one of the goals of price optimization is to recognize an action where margin and revenue opportunities might exist because of competitor activity or whatever else might be happening in the market. So these are just direct impacts on the revenue side of the equation, just looking at two activities alone. On the cost side of things, there's a lot of automation and efficiency gains to be made, but a couple of, I guess, a couple of obvious examples might be by reducing the amount of inventory that you need to hold to meet the demand that you are likely to experience for the coming operational window. You're directly injecting cash into the business because for anyone on the call who's familiar with free cash flow, if you reduce your inventory on hand, you're directly impacting the free cash flow to the firm, which is quite a good efficiency saving there on the cost side. And then finally, there's the automation piece. And so we're not of the opinion that we need to be replacing job roles and, suddenly you need to remove this whole team because their entire roles can be automated. It's not as black and white as that at all, or as cut and dry as that. It's more that different tranches of people's roles are likely to be automated. So if you think about someone's role in supply chain, they might have a bottom, say 20 to 30% of their role where they're just doing a lot of manual data analysis, a lot of low-level decisions are being made, and it's that bottom 20 to 30% of their decisions that can likely be automated quite well with an AI system. And so you're not only saving on time there, but you're freeing them up to do the more valuable tasks as well. So there's in answer to your question, Cash, there's a lot of value to be created on both the revenue and the cost side.
Yeah, definitely. Rushabh, would like to get your thoughts on as well.
Building on what Eamonn is saying, obviously revenue and cost are the two things we think about when thinking about what benefits AI can have in supply chain. And we strongly believe actually that experience as well is the third thing where we can see consumer experience generally getting an uplift if you're able to provide them the right products at a time that they wanted. I mean, we believe that the products that we sell make consumers happy because they like to see a good space around them. We make their homes beautiful, and the gratification that we can give to customers with the product coming to them, in the right time, as well as the right quality. I think these two things, go a long way in really establishing a great customer experience for us. Just taking two examples. One is obviously around, how do we forecast demand, ensure that products are, at a reasonable lead time to customers, and the fact that how are we able to get them from a warehouse to the customer in the fastest time possible. I think that sort of is one area. The other area is, and I touched upon it briefly earlier, is, if there's a product problem in the future with if there's a problem with the product, let's say something has gone wrong, we do have the data and we do have the ability to go back and trace where the product was from, reach out to other customers who may have that problem, which then allows us to be more proactive about, calling out to customers, say that you need to take care of this product, there is something wrong with it, or the fact that is, we'll probably do a retake and we'll give you a new product, and we're able to drive all of this because we have the right information. And then we're able to, stitch together, for example, the experience one particular customer had with the product, understand and diagnose the issue, and then go back to other customers, which, just the proactiveness in that thought allows us to drive a much better customer experience. And it just, leads to a greatly improved trust in a brand for customers. And I think that's the other area as well that, we see great benefits.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's quite important to ensure that you're delivering a great customer experience as well. Georgie, what would you say with the benefits would be for the retail and e-commerce sector?
Yeah, sure. We obviously from a financing side, because we have visibility into the business data, we help with risk assessment. So if the business is operating in a healthy way, as we expect it to be, we can then translate that into a lower cost of capital at the end of the day. It's pretty simple, cut and dry. So I just think that like AI has such a massive role to play, and Eamonn sort of hit it perfectly. It's not about replacing people's roles, it's about helping in decision making at the end of the day, and therefore allowing more time for other things within the business.
Yeah, definitely. And Rushabh, you mentioned that BROSA, at BROSA, you own your own supply chain. Just curious to know, what has been the impact on your supply chain during the pandemic? What have you learnt? And is there any tips that you can provide to the audience that are listening?
I guess in short, we've been busy over the last year, as you can imagine, owning the supply chain. We've seen every possible challenge that one can think of over the last year, but it's been obviously very interesting and very challenging at the same time. I guess to start off with, we saw reasonable periods of shutdowns when no production was happening, and we continue to see those challenges because we do run a global supply chain, based out of, China is primary, but we also run Malaysia, we also run India, and we source products from all of these countries, and they're all going through their own journey on COVID. So we've had, shutdowns in India earlier this year, we're having shutdowns in Malaysia right now, and it's, going through a cycle. So I think shutdowns is one area where, we've seen impact. The other is just a surge in demand for our category, because a lot of people spending on our category has gone up considerably over the last year, because that's where people are investing all of their savings that they are not using, for example, to travel or to do other things that they would have normally. And I think that has put a big constraint on manufacturing capacity, because this is in some sense a short-term trend that manufacturers don't feel the need to go and invest in additional capacity for. They believe it'll ride out, and we've seen that challenge. And the third has been around, generally shipping and, just the amount of global chaos the whole shipping industry has been in through the year and continues. And we don't know when we'll see an end of it. I think all of this sort of coming together, obviously, brings great focus on the fact that, I guess, in the long term, we all need to run a supply chain that can be as agile as possible, right? And the whole sort of, ability for us to be able to reduce lead times is probably the single biggest factor that can help a business win on the supply chain side of things, which is, what can we do to improve our lead time is the single biggest question. And that's been a question on all our minds right now. And, as we come out of some of these, let's say, what was originally short-term has now become medium-term challenges, but we probably need to think long-term to think about, what is it that we're doing to be able to cut down lead times, right? And cutting down lead times probably comes to three things, which is, how well are your manufacturers planning their raw materials? I think that's really important for us to think about, which is, how do we extend this demand forecasting literally all the way back to how manufacturers plan for their raw materials? And that is super critical for us. It is about ensuring how are they able to, prioritize manufacturing at their end, which is, unless you have the raw materials, don't start making anything. Wait for all the raw materials to come to you before you start making. So you're reducing time taken when a product is moving from one stage of manufacturing to the other, and it's able to go in and come out straight. And the third is around prioritization, which is how you're helping manufacturers prioritize which is the most important product for them to make first and get out. And I think it comes down to these three things, and this helps us sort of, reduce that overall lead time. So the more intelligence that, we believe we can provide in each of these areas to our manufacturers, which actually hinges on our demand forecast, but then we're able to bring that back to manufacturers saying that, these are the implications for you guys. And that becomes important. I think we see, more and more need of us having to backward integrate in a much deeper way with manufacturers to bring down the overall lead time. And I think that's what is, made very, very clear if it wasn't before this last year and a half, that, it's even more important for us to be able to run, a very, very agile supply chain and do whatever it takes for us to, reduce that fundamental lead time that we're seeing. So I think, it's been interesting.
Yeah, I can definitely tell it's been interesting and very busy for you as well. Eamonn and Georgie, anything that you wanted to add to that, or anything that you've seen just through the pandemic as well?
Yeah, sure. We first started out in 2018 putting a QR code onto an avocado. And a lot of people thought no one would scan that. And we did actually have some scanning there behind that, about 1,000 scans a month, which is pretty high for Australia. And now that everyone knows that a QR code is actually going to deliver you some sort of information, and there's information held behind that URL and QR code, it's gone crazy. So now we have QR codes on apples and avocados, some meat products as well in store. And I've seen the scan rates just go through the roof. So it's been an interesting journey, I think, for people that have markers on food products, that people now know that there is something behind that. It's just not something, because, you know, in Asia, they pay using QR codes. They do a lot using QR codes, and it just wasn't something we ever uptook very well, notoriously. And now it's, you know, that it actually does do something and takes you somewhere. So I think that's been a great step forward for Australia as a whole, to just be a little bit more aware of you know, what a QR code can do, but also just that we do live and breathe in that digital app world, and that's where we're going to get and will get all of our information from.
Yeah, it's quite funny how times have changed, and the QR code now is something that's being utilized everywhere, and people are just, yeah, all on board now. Eamonn, was there anything on your end for that?
I was just going to just build on what Rushabh was saying. Like, Rushabh, what you just described is essentially our you're on the customer side of what our thesis is. You've just described the collaborative supply chain and the value that would bring to your business. So as I said before, very encouraging to hear another customer describe that. So yeah, completely in complete agreement.
Amazing, yeah, definitely. Okay, we might actually also talk about predictions. So we've spoken about what the impact has been with the pandemic as well, but what are your predictions for AI driven e-commerce and supply chain? And Eamonn, might pass that over to you.
Sure, yeah, okay. So I get what you could break this down into an AI maturity curve, I suppose. It's a handy mental tool to think about this. So you could think about the maturity curve as having 3 stages. The first one being predictive, the second being prescriptive, and the third being autonomous. So by predictive, what we mean is what will happen. So that's your demand forecasting. That's, you know, helping you to build a bit of an understanding of what you need to prepare for in the future as an e-commerce or retail business. Prescriptive is taking that a little bit further and using an AI system to make recommendations of what to do. So instead of just merely making a forecast and then having humans to make the decisions, you can have an AI system which is prescribing some decisions or some recommendations of how to best meet that demand with inventory management, warehouse space, logistics, things like that. And then the final is autonomous. And so that's what I was describing before about having an AI system that is running part or all of your supply chain, which would be the end state, I suppose. But where most businesses seem to be at, they've got some predictive capability. Most retail businesses, I should say, they've got some predictive capability of some description. Some have moved across to the prescriptive, where they're having an AI system which is making some recommendations. But where we see the most investment being made in the coming 5-10 years, perhaps, is helping businesses to move from that prescriptive stage to that autonomous stage. So that's from AI stage 2 to AI stage 3. And so that's where we're focusing our time. That's where we're trying to help businesses to not only accept AI recommendations of what to do in the supply chain, but also turn over the lower level decisions or a portion of the supply chain to an AI co-pilot for some help. So that's where we see the investment in the coming years.
I like how you explained that in predictive, prescriptive, and autonomous. That was very interesting. Georgie, anything that you would add, and what would you see?
Yeah, I think I said before, like farming in particular and agriculture, there'll be a cultural change there with the aging demographic where things will become completely digital. I think that in the past, integrations with ERP systems have been a slow process, and that certainly is becoming faster and faster. I feel like everyone's sort of got themselves to a certain point where they keep pushing so that everyone can integrate a lot quicker. And, you know, that's music to my ears and all of my devs. But to everyone everyone that we start to integrate with right now, we sort of pray and hope that they have certain things in place, and 50 to 75% of the time they do. And I feel like in the past sort of 18 months especially, people have had the time to spend on what is going to make things easier for everyone. So I believe that's going to happen. And also just that infrastructure push to go digital will become compliance, I think. And I don't think it's very far away at all. So I would just encourage everyone to get digital as soon as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And Rushabh, over to you on what you would say are the predictions that you have.
I mean, what I would like to see happening is obviously this feedback loop being sort of covering a much larger range of stakeholders, thinking about sort of external demand signals right up to sort of, raw material trends for that, right? And thinking about sort of, what's the fastest way for us to pass information down this loop. And I think, keep making it as fast as possible. I think that's probably what will happen is, there will be much faster processing of signals at every stage, which then will allow for a much faster loop to, take place in terms of feedback through all of these different stakeholders, which will then mean a leaner, faster, more optimized supply chain. And I think that sort of, is the continuum on which we need to keep moving forward. I would love to, be on that journey. So, yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. So I'd like to let the audience ask a few questions as well. But before we do that, just wanted to see how can the audience reach out to you if they're interested in what you're doing. So Georgie?
Yeah, sure. The best way to get hold of myself and David Indiri as the CEO is to email info@freshsupplyco.com. We're also very active on LinkedIn, so grab either of us on there. That's the best way.
Thank you. And Rushabh?
Yeah, I'm available on LinkedIn as well. I'm quite active. I'm always on it, so that's probably the best way to reach.
Yeah. Amazing. And Eamonn?
Yeah, much the same. If you find me on LinkedIn, I'll always respond, or I'm at ebarrett@remy.ai.
Fantastic. So we've got a few questions that have come in, so I wanted to leave some time so that we can ask those. So question number 1, how can we avoid discrimination in AI models learning based on historic users/buyers data, which might not inclusive, since inclusive data collection from the diverse community is just starting? So anyone from the panel that would like to answer that question?
Could I ask a clarification question on that one?
Yeah.
I'm just unsure what is meant by inclusive buyers data. I'm not sure I can fully comprehend that one. Sorry.
Okay, so what we might do is let the question come through with clarification. But in the meantime, what I might ask is another one that has come through. So what strategies have you employed in explaining these AI tools to customers? The farmer is a great example. They have older, more established mental models. How are you solving this problem now? So maybe Georgie, do you want to jump into for that one?
Yeah, sure. For in terms of the farmer, the best way that we've been able to do it is to look at the processes and obviously where they pack and things like that, and how they ship everything out. And we as at Fresh Supply are very hands-on. We do an audit of your infrastructure mainly, and the way in which you may label and things like that, and how you pack and how things move, and then how you actually take that data. Everyone that we've ever worked with has been very, very different. So nothing is ever the same. And we look at that, and our main motto is to not create any further homework for you, is to basically work within your current parameters and say, this is what you need to do in order to streamline it potentially, or extract information from that. Now, we have a system called the PMS system, producer management tool or product management tool. And, you can actually enter your processing data in there. When it can look at your inventory and then look at your shipments and things like that. And we break that down for you in terms of the data that you want to capture. As I said before, we try and capture everything. I've had people give me a 30,000 row spreadsheet that we've been able to sort of bring into our system fairly easily. We can never sort of shy away from any part of data that is digital. How we would prefer to receive it is obviously through a beautiful ERP integration where no one has to be involved at all, but it's not like that. So mainly the first thing we do is look at your systems that you currently have, how we can help them become digital, whether our tool is the right tool. We have a few groups that we work with that we can suggest you using, but that's basically it. We get our hands dirty. And I think at this point in time, you know, and especially to producers, like we need to do that because they notoriously have worked. You know, it is farming, it is packing, it's all very hands-on. You need to basically look at it at the lowest level possible in order to get the greatest rewards of your data and what you get, like how we're going to actually do anything with it. And also understanding what your main goal is. Like compliance is one thing, but whether you want to tell the consumer story, the product asset story for the consumer, or whether it's just getting yourself more informed about the data that you're actually capturing and how you can forecast, as everyone was saying before. So yeah, I mean, it does come down to just looking at how you're currently working and seeing how you can be onboarded in various different ERP systems or our own.
Yeah. And just to clarify that other question that we just asked, so it's to the panelists, have you experienced bias/discrimination in these AI-driven supply chain decisions and predictions?
Well, not really, that we've come across so far. But I can only speak to our experience. But from what we've seen, where bias is or can be a real challenge is when you have use cases like HR and things like that. So like, say for example, if you're building a system which you're hoping can help you to screen resumes as an extreme example or a simple example for your onboarding, that historical hiring data could be, you know, extraordinarily biased, and so you're potentially setting yourself up to fail by looking at something like that. In the supply chain, it's a little bit, from what we've seen, I should say, it's just a little bit, those challenges or those biases aren't as apparent, and you know, by extension they might be, they could be worse if they aren't being picked up. But when you're just dealing with like transaction data and demand and things like that, I'm struggling to think about how it can be overly biased and how it can cause problems to the way that the question has been framed. But perhaps I have misunderstood it again.
I mean, I think in terms of, if you think about demand and, you know, data that is to do with consumers in that sense, I think we strongly believe there is bias because there is probably a signal that you're missing out on that you haven't really captured as the data input, and that's causing the bias. So I think the push is to then capture what is that missing signal that you've left out, for example, that you need to bring into your data set to then ensure you can explain the bias or you can explain what is happening with the data, I would think.
Yeah,
great point.
Yeah, definitely. Another question that's come through: what keeps you up at night, and what are the biggest risks/challenges you are mitigating against? Anyone from the panel wanted to jump in for that one?
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, for the last year, there's a lot of things that keeps me up at night. But I think the one thing is, you know, what I've spoken about is how do we build a truly agile supply chain and, you know, find the most cost efficient way again to meet consumer demand in the right form. I think that's probably in that one sort of, you know, it sounds very generic, but it's probably what all of which we are trying to achieve through sort of what we're building at BROSA. So yeah.
I had to smile because, you know, running a business, there's a lot of things that could keep you up at night. Staying in front of the tech, I think, hasn't actually been our biggest challenge, but I can see how that could become a challenge for most. I mean, you have to always stay ahead of it. You have to always be able to do everything quite swiftly, and there's only so many hours in a day, and you know, our teams, none of us are together. We're all spread out, which has been fine. But especially during the last sort of 18 months, we've wanted more and more to be together, because you obviously do a lot of planning and everything online, but you sort of solve a lot of problems a lot quickly together. So I think just having your tech in place and also having, being able to see each other has been probably the hardest thing. But yeah, staying ahead of that and always being and thinking about what the market needs and requires from a technical point of view a lot of the time. It requires a lot of reading and a lot of research and reading a lot of white papers, all that kind of stuff, just to make sure you've got the best tech in place, or whatever you need to change in your product.
Yeah,
and how swiftly you can do it.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's really important to understand your market and be on top of it as well. Now, this is a question for Georgie. Do you see any trend toward an increase in collaborative planning and forecasting in the agricultural supply chain? And if so, in what segments? Historically, there has been a lot of hesitance in sharing data, especially from the middle layers of agents and brokers who use it for the competitive advantage.
Yeah, sure. Look, how we've sort of seen it work over the past at least 18 months since we started our finance journey is that we've been able to, as I said before, we've been able to forecast or help lenders see how the business is actually running, not look at how the past has run. And I think that creates a lot more insight into future lending. I think notoriously, you look at, and the first year of the pandemic, people would have suffered a lot of loss, and if you were to lend on that loss, or people would miss out and not have access to capital because of that loss, is not great forward thinking. So if you look at sort of what's upcoming and what the throughput is of these businesses, then you're thinking about what the future is, and not banking on the future, although you kind of are, but you're looking at that's what happened 18 months ago, but the next 6 to 12 months are looking like this, and the next 24 months after that are looking like this, based on what's happening in the world, the fact that if we weren't able to export into China, what would happen with the supply that currently sat in Australia? Where else could it go? Where it go? It gives you a greater insight into that. And I think it's been a really interesting time, in terms of lending for us, and just seeing that, having all of that data in the palm of our hand has obviously helped us get better rates for people for lending. So I think, if anything, we're probably opening up a lot of the how it used to work is not how it should work for the future, and the market's telling us that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think what we'll do is if anyone else has any further questions, please feel free to send them across to us, and we can send them across, or you can connect directly with Georgie, Rushabh, or Eamonn to ask those questions. But one last question that I'd like to ask: is there anything that you'd like to add in, a final note, either on your company or what you see? Just a final note from all of you. So Eamonn, might start with you.
Sure. Yeah. All I would add is that when it comes to AI in supply chain, but in business more generally, we think it's going to become as synonymous as software. So, you're unlikely in the next 5 years to have a software product beyond the bare bones that doesn't have some sort of machine learning or AI built within it. Prime example is Canva. You wouldn't think that a design SaaS business would have anything to do with machine learning, but they have an enormous AI team in Sydney. So just as one example, but if that isn't motivation to get involved and learn a few things, then I don't know what is. So that would be all I'd add.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. Rushabh, anything to add?
I think from our standpoint, we're always, very keen to explore what our data can do for us. And I think that's sort of, we're quite curious continuously. And that sort of, is a theme that we'd like to continue in that sense, which is why we believe AI is so powerful and can become, really help inform decision-making at all levels within the organization. And we're looking forward to sort of, continuing our sort of journey along that path, I think. So, yeah.
Yeah. And Georgie?
Yeah, I'd have to agree. Data is super exciting, and 10 years ago, it just, it was just something that was collected, and how are we to know this is where it would lead us now? That it sort of helps us in all of our decision making without us even knowing it. You have an Apple phone and a Gmail account, and you think that they're yours, but really data drives what you see on those phones and those panels. So yeah, it's exciting where this is going to lead. Like from a supply chain perspective, we're really excited to work with more folks, different supply chains, a lot more data. Don't ever hold back on your data. More is better. And just trust the people that are working with it, because we are the professionals at the end of the day when it comes to data, and AI is only going to enhance that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's been really great to just hear how you've all incorporated AI into your businesses, and how you're looking to do that as well in the future, and excited to see how it all goes as well. And I know that all of the individuals that are listening here have learnt a fair bit as well. So thank you to each of you for joining us today. And yeah, I'd like to just say, for anyone that wants to connect with either Rushabh, Eamonn, or Georgie, please feel free to. And if you want to hear more about Bob and our events as well, because we'll be running a series of AI events throughout the year, please feel free to follow us on LinkedIn as well as Eventbrite as well. So thank you everyone for joining us. Really appreciate it, and have an amazing afternoon.
Thanks, Cash.
Thank you. Thanks, Cash.
Thanks, Cash.
See you
Thanks,
later.
everyone.
Bye.
Thanks. See you. Bye.